He had kissed a woman, and he kissed her long and good. I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the Hey Guys podcast. This week we're looking back at the nostalgia-fueled coming-of-age baseball dramedy, The Sandlot. Or as it's known to us kids east of the Atlantic, The Sandlot Kids, because, well, what the hell is a Sandlot? A brilliant baseball movie, but an even better coming-of-age movie. The Sandlot might not have the same cultural relevance in the UK as it does in the States, but for my group of friends at least, this is one of the most important, memorable, and downright quotable movies of our youth. I mean, that's how I feel about it, Rob. How do you feel about it? Did you grow up with this movie? Do you care about this movie?
Well, I watched it once as a kid, and all I can say is, right, sexism, sexual assault, and peer pressure aside, I didn't like it, dude.
You didn't like it?
No, I didn't like it. Like,
oh my
the
days.
whole sexual assault thing freaked me out for a minute, right?
That's my favorite scene.
Really?
I know exactly. You're talking about the scene at the
pool.
The pool. Yeah. I think it's an absolutely fantastic.
Just to get it's sexual assault.
Oh, dude, I think you're being awfully harsh. Like, this dude was willing to risk it all for a kiss. For a kiss, he couldn't swim. He was willing to drown himself to get one kiss. Don't get me wrong. That one line where it's like, she knows what she's doing. That's not a great read. If you get that in court and he's like, he's up on the stand.
Yeah, I love
he
it,
said.
Right? You say you risk it all. What about the guys that follow women down a dark alley? They're willing to risk it all for what they want.
That's the thing with this, right? Just to be clear, of course it's a bit questionable. But firstly, let's just accept that 11-year-old kids are dirty little bastards. Like that's just a given.
I totally get that, yeah. And it's the 90s, so in air quotes, different era, all that shit, right? The sexism as well, where the worst thing you could say to somebody is you play like a girl. Like, it doesn't read as well now that it did in the 90s.
Yeah, but this is not just the 90s. This is the movie looking back. Well, it's a bizarre thing because I always look back at this film. I think, my God, this is one of the best encapsulations of 50s Americana of all time, until you actually realize it's set in the 60s.
Yeah.
I always thought it was set in the 50s. It's actually set in 1962.
It's set in the 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Babe Ruth died in 1948. I appreciate Babe Ruth was one of the biggest baseball players ever. But when you're playing baseball, as kids, when we played football, when we played sport, we pretended to be the people who we're watching now. They're all obsessed with a guy that died 14 years ago.
Yeah, but right. If you were going to do a comparison, it's like if you grew up in Argentina in say now, for instance, would it be weird if you were pretending, you talk with such reverence about Diego Maradona? Because that's what we're talking about here. Like, of course, obviously, in Argentina, you've got Lionel Messi now as a comparison point. But you imagine if nobody came along since then who is on the same level. You are talking about the hands down, or at least at the time, the greatest baseball player of all time. And, the other thing as well, this is a time when there's not the internet. You're not watching tons of baseball. So what you're hearing are the stories from your father, for instance. And, of course, all you would be hearing about is Babe Ruth.
But also, right, they're not likable kids.
Oh, my God. They're such likable kids.
They're not. The bully, Ham, he's a prick. He's just a bully.
Oh, my God. Ham is so good.
You're out of your mind. This kid who's willing to attack poor George just because he's new. Right? You got the stupid twins then who just won, Mikey Repeat or whatever his name is. The only nice guy on that team is Benny, who, and up until this moment, I never realized, is the fast skater kid from the Mighty Ducks 2 and 3.
Yeah. I shouldn't have said because now I'm thinking about the character. Yeah. He's a kind of standout because, frankly, the Benny's a mysterious one because, one, he looks much older than the other kids.
Yeah.
And two, but when you think of the character, Benny, you've got to remember this is all coming from the perspective of Smalls. So everything that happens in this movie, and I think maybe it's the reason I'm willing to forgive so much of it, is that it is absolutely dripping, for lack of a better term, with nostalgia. This is a story ostensibly being told by Smalls as a grown-up. And that's actually the director is grown-up Smalls.
It is, and he's the narrator,
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So what he's doing when he talks about Benny...
We're going to be going now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's just going to be this relentless thing. But when he's talking about Benny, you can see the cat. It's almost ridiculous. He's the nicest kid in the world. He's super handsome. He's the most talented. It's like he shows up, he gives him a baseball cap, he gives him a baseball glove. He's got like the fancy trainers, yet he doesn't have the money to buy a baseball. He pays for them all to go to the fairgrounds. And basically what he's doing is eulogizing his friend. Because obviously the way the film ends is that Benny goes on to have like a career in the MLB. Like he's a famous player. So imagine if you were telling a story of like in your youth and your best friend was David Beckham. Of course, you would just totally kind of like everything would be rose tinted, and that is what this entire movie is. Everything, right down to the giant dog and everything, is just based on what his memories were. And the thing that's what. And I know it hasn't like taken to you, but I think the reason it works so well for me is that perfectly pitched sense of nostalgia that runs all the way through this movie. And why the fact that being a baseball film, which, I'm a baseball fan now, but when I was younger, my friends and I, none of us were interested in baseball. But as I said, it's not so much a baseball film as it is a movie about being kids.
Yeah.
And when I see this film, it's someone going, oh, remember what it was like to just play at the park all day with your friends. And that's what we did when we were younger.
Yeah, and I do totally understand that, because I did. We'd go out at like 8 a.m. We wouldn't come home until the street lights turned on. Everything like that. It's just, I didn't connect with this film. And you're saying about the rose-tinted glasses and everything, and I do understand that, but I see it different. This is a story of unrequited love.
Well, between
Smalls. Smalls is, oh my God, Smalls is so in love with Benny.
I think they're all in love with Benny. I think that's the point. I don't think you're taking a very different read to this to me. Where, in fairness, he's a little bit too into Benny in that final scene. When, let's be clear, the only sports film in all of history that ends on a stolen base. Like the reason I love baseball films growing up is because they're like visually dramatic. You can set up the moment.
Right. You want to talk about the ending, right? The ending really got to me. Because he's there in this shack that doesn't look lockable, right?
Yeah.
Giving older Benny a thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's basically like his man cave. As he sits down, he's got what would be now in the 90s, these really expensive baseballs just there in his office. Anybody could just steal. Mm-hmm. The murderous roll ball, the Babe Ruth ball. And they're just there. And I'm thinking, no, anyone can just walk in and take this fucking baseball. What are you doing?
It's amazing how differently we watch films. I was like, I've already got it written down here. It's like, I just know how angry Rob's going to be about how quickly Smalls apparently learns how to play baseball.
Yes.
Like, you were talking about a movie where, we did Point Break a few weeks ago, and Rob was still furious about the fact that Keanu learned to surf too quickly. And obviously there was the whole sandwich issue about how quickly they got their sandwich order. But as I was watching this, I was like, even I'm willing to forgive a lot because it is kind of based on this nostalgic rose-tinted memories. But he is the worst baseball player of all time. He literally cannot throw at all. And then all of a sudden, Benny, of course, comes up. He's just throw it like you're doing a paper round. It's like, how did he ever do a paper round if he can't throw? But then all of a sudden, he's throwing to third. He's part of the team. He learns how to play so ridiculously quickly.
And I appreciate that's probably because it's a story that's told in perspective. He's telling this story, so things
it's
move
still
on.
dumb.
But as we're watching, it's completely dumb because there's a way of watching it. With all these films, these kind of sports films, you need that montage where they get better. There's no montage here. It's just literally 30 seconds. I don't care how good you are not controlling a ball to land in somebody's glove after hitting it with a baseball bat.
It's absurd. It's absurd. Again, it comes back to the nostalgia thing, but it's a ridiculous concept that anybody could be like, all right, your whole summer is based on this moment. If you're deep in the outfield and I'm just going to hit this baseball directly into your glove, like, come on, dude, how magical is this? Yeah. And this kid, Benny, is painted in such a ridiculously magical light. It's almost absurd.
Yeah, but do you know, you said he was terrible at baseball and he asked his stepdad to teach him to throw. The fact that the stepdad is played by Dennis Leary is famous for just being an angry, angry man. I honestly feel there's a dark side to the stepdad. Like he gave him a black eye on purpose. You're not going to learn to catch a ball, catch this one. Do you know what I mean?
You think he put a bit of extra heat on it?
Yeah, and I do. I mean, it's Dennis Leary. I do think that there's some things being forgotten about a belt being taken off and things like that.
See, I think that is the difference between watching this film is that you're trying to find this additional level of drama, which I just don't think exists. But I also think that's one of the beauties of this movie, are the incredibly low but incredibly relatable stakes. Like, everyone can relate to the idea. Again, you know, when we were younger, all we do is play football all day. Yes, we didn't hit a baseball over somebody's fence to a dog, but like, it was a daily occurrence where we play football, the ball, you kick it too hard, it'd end up either in the stream behind one goal, so you'd have to send someone in to go fishing for it, or it'd go onto the street on the other side, and there was always the danger that it'd get hit by a car, or more realistically, get stuck under a car. Again, not quite as dramatic as the dog story,
but
relatable. But again, it's even the stuff with the father, in terms of like the idea of taking his baseball and playing with it and then losing it. It's super low stakes. But again, I can imagine if my dad had a football signed by Pele and I took it to the park to play football with my friends and then it got burst or got lost, like how much trouble I'd be in. Like, I still to this day have that kind of inherent fear of my father. Like, I was outside the front of my house one day for no apparent reason. And I hope my mum never listens to this because I lied about it and I never told her. I threw a snowball at the front window thinking, I'll just scare my dad. And it went directly through the window. Glass everywhere in the front room. Of course, I was thinking at the time that my father was in the living room. I almost died on the spot. But like this film, my friend, do you know what he did? He grabbed my arm and just wouldn't let me go because he wanted to see what would happen if my dad came out, i.e. come out and kill me. So of course I eventually ran away. I came back, my mum was fixing the window and she was like, did you do this? Did you break the window? And I immediately went on the fence. I was like, you would say that, wouldn't you? You would blame me. And I feel terrible because this day I still haven't had the heart to tell her, but she apologized to me. She was like, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I was like, yeah, you're right. It was me, man. It was me. I was the one who broke the window. But again, that relatable kind of like, being scared of your dad, losing the ball.
You're on about where you kick the balls and stuff. For us, it was actually kicking it onto the roof of the leisure centre. You kick it too hard, it goes on. So then you've got to shimmy up a drain pipe.
Get
the ball. Like, you think about it now, right? With the stakes and stuff. Back then, we were, 10, 11, 12. No problem. Just climbing a drain pipe to go on top of a leisure centre to get the ball.
Well, that was the risk. We were willing to take. We were willing to go that extra mile. And again, that's why I thought this movie had worked for you, because we are right on the sweet spot with this film. We are senior smalls now. We are the ones. We're not those kids anymore. We've grown up with them. They're like, if you look at those kids, well, obviously they're men now. They're all almost exactly the same age as us. So I
watched it once, right? And probably back then I wasn't watching a lot of kid. Like, it's really weird, right? At the same time this was out, I'm loving Major League.
Yeah.
I'm loving Necessary Roughness with Scott Bakula. I'm loving all these sports films. Mighty Ducks I enjoy. Things like that. But for some reason, I never...
You've got every single one I don't have on my list. I've got The Natural, League of Their Own, Moneyball, I've got Major League and Bill Durham.
Like, I've seen The Sandlot. I've told you the story many times about how my mother would rent films for us, come home and we'd watch them in the evening when she goes back to work and stuff, because we grew up right next to a video store. I preferred Rookie of the Year over this.
Dude, that doesn't belong in the same category. It doesn't belong in the same breath.
Watching this film now, I can see actually the joy leave your eyes every time I say that this film is a bit...
Well, that comparison really was a dagger to my heart. You're talking about an absolute run-of-the-mill nothing film compared to a film that... I don't think this is just me. This film is genuinely beloved.
I much preferred Rookie of the Year because it's about baseball. You keep talking about how this film is a baseball film. It's not.
No, that's my point. It isn't like... The fact that it's a baseball film is almost irrelevant. This film's just about being young. That's why it's so. That's why it works so well. That's why when I mention these other films. Oh, sorry.
I say being young, being a bully, peer pressure for this kid George, who feels like he has to fit in. So I know Babe Ruth is blah blah blah. Just tell them the truth. They'll accept you for who you are. Or if they don't accept you, they're horrible fucking people. Which they are. That ginger kid behind the bloody base, I fucking hate that kid. Ham. Yeah.
Ham's the best. Ham, that's the thing. Some of these questions now are completely irrelevant. Because I was going to ask you, who is the MVP of this movie? Either Patrick Renner as Ham or the brilliantly named, what's his name? Chauncey Leopardi as Squints. I think they're the two kind of standouts in this movie.
Well, so the rapist or the bully? Which one is the...
I'm amazed. Like, I've literally got down Patrick Renner's Ham. I've got a thing here as one of the most memorable child performances, up there with the Stand By Me kids. I'm like, he's so good in this film. And I'm like, do you not remember what it was like to be young? Little boys are assholes. We were all assholes. That is what this film is about. It's like your little shitbags, but then once you get on the inside of that group, suddenly you're on the inside. It doesn't make it perfect, but I like the fact that it's like, yeah, he absolutely had to prove himself. Of course, he got his foot in the door because, Benny the Jet's like a magic kid. But this would be so boring if they were all just kind of just nice kids. And I will stand by my defense of the scene. I mean, you keep calling Squints a rapist or a sex offender or whatever. I think that scene is absolutely perfect. I'm sorry, like the way it's shot, again, like the nostalgia kind of feel like this perfect image of like a swimming pool at summertime. When he kisses her, and just as you think it might get weird, Benny King's this magic moment kicks in, and you're just like, how can you be angry? Even, I mean, they do kind of deal with it. Like Wendy smiles afterwards, which again, everyone, you could take the reading as like, oh, why should she be happy that kid's? But, everybody likes to feel loved. And this kid's basically risked his, like, he was like willing to die to sneak one kiss off you. I mean, I'd be kind of impressed too.
It's Stockholm syndrome as well, because she ended up marrying her bloody...
Yeah, I did. It's a bit weird. I mean, everything about that scene, but then they even say in the sequence, like, basically what I'm thinking in my head is like, what he had done was sneaky, rotten, low, and cool. It was just like, when you were 12, the idea of somebody, I think the term they use is putting the moves on the lifeguard.
Even that creepy, I'm about to commit a sex offense smile that he does right before he...
Oh, the smile is perfect.
It's not,
the smile is perfect.
No, it's not.
Oh, dude, I love that smile. And again, that moment, talk about like capturing what it's like to be like a young kid with your friends, where they're all standing around. They think he's dying. And he's got that perfect mix of like, come on, Squints. And then the other guy's just like ragging on him still, saying, oh my God, he looks like a dead fish. Even then, and it's kind of like, like if one of your friends fell over, there's always that split second when you're just like, you want to make sure that they're okay. But as soon as they, really haven't hurt themselves, you just start ragging on them immediately.
You want to talk about Squints as well. This whole film is his fucking fault. Like he keeps telling us, because I'm guessing that he lives next door. It's his treehouse. I'm assuming that
it must be
the one that lives next door to James Earl Jones.
Right? Yeah.
So he's telling them all this story about this terrible, terrible dog and this terrible, terrible man. Which, again, is that a bit racist? Because they
didn't even know he was black. They thought he was white.
There's no way in hell Squints didn't know his neighbor's color, right? There's no way in hell Squints didn't know anything about his neighbor.
That's what there's... Again, I think you're taking it very literally. I know what you mean. It does seem ridiculous, but it's very much being sold on the idea that they think Mr. Myrtle is this white guy. But of course, it's black James Earl Jones, which is...
Well, it's not, because even the story, they talk about Mr. Myrtle. Mr. Myrtle's black.
No, he's not. He's white.
No, he's not.
In the black and white bit of the story, he's white.
He's black.
Dude, he's white. Mr. Myrtle is white.
He's black.
He is 100% white, dude. There's no way. He's white as fuck. He's like he's just a white dude, a white, overweight dude.
He's played by a black actor.
Mr. Myrtle in the black and white scene when he's talking about his grandma, and he says forever.
That's not Mr. Myrtle. The guy saying
the guy he's talking to, but I'm sure the guy he's talking to is white.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna have to put up the podcast. You are gonna have to go back and watch this because, dude, I am sure he's white. Anyway, right, missed the point. The fact that it being Squints' fault. Yes, it might well be Squints' fault, and it is at the end. They do all kind of give him, when he says, "Oh, if you just knocked on the door, I would have given you your baseball bat." And of course, they didn't do it because Squints said you can't do that because Mr. Myrtle's the meanest old man in the neighborhood, or some other such nonsense. But again, it just leads into those low stakes. Like, it doesn't really matter. It could have been fixed by them just going and knocking the door. But that's what makes this movie magical. I actually think this movie is at its best when it's not actually about anything. And the first half, it's just about being young. That's it. Like, you get, in terms of like perfectly capturing that sense of nostalgia, those like back-to-back musical numbers, the scene that you hate in the pool, when it goes straight from Benny King into, what is it? It doesn't make any sense because the song is actually, sorry, I've lost my notes here. What is it? Oh my God, I've lost the song. Ray Charles playing America. God, what, in the Independence Day scene. America the Beautiful by Ray Charles, sorry. Which, again, doesn't make sense because that was written in or performed in 1972, and this was set in 1962. But going from, like, one scene to the next, and they're playing, like, the scene in the dark, they wouldn't be able to play baseball. I mean, you know, we talked about it when you're younger. You would play until it got dark. You wouldn't be able to play baseball in the dark, even if it was being lit up by fireworks, as ridiculous as that sounds. But those two moments back to back, they don't really have any narrative impact. It's just kids being kids. The second half of the film, when they do try and add a bit of plot in terms of getting the baseball back from the beast, it does go a little bit. What's that show? The Little Rascals. That's when it suddenly does feel like a kids' film rather than a film about grown-ups looking back at youth. And maybe that's where I kind of, even though that's where maybe a lot of the most famous moments come from, that's where I kind of lose interest a little bit because it really does become a kids' film. But the first half in particular, when it is just a movie about just being young, I think it's absolutely borderline a perfect film. But obviously you disagree. And you could, like, the fact that you think Ham and Squints are horrible, when I've got it written down that they're two of the best.
No.
If we think of, like, the high watermark for, like, kid performances on screen being Stand By Me, I think, like, just below that, you've got a lot of the kids from this film. I even think, what's his name is Smalls. I think he's great. Like, the way he has that, like, that breakdown when he realizes the ball that he's lost. Like, no, Babe Ruth, the son. So he's like, that's the same guy. Like, the desperation in his face when he realizes he's lost his dad's baseball is absolute gold. And I can realize by the fact that you're letting me talk this long that you're looking up the actor, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's a white guy.
Yeah, right. You son of a bitch. Dude, he's so white. I was like, I know it's black and white, but I would go as far as saying, like, and you said it was such conviction that I started questioning myself. But as I'm painting this picture, I'm like, no, he's not just white. No. He's like aggressively white. Yeah. He's like East Coast America Jersey.
I must have switched off when I was watching that part because it's just as I was, I just quickly rewatched the video on mute and I'm just looking at him and thinking, no, that dude's white.
But beyond the fact, obviously we have different opinions about the film. But I'd be interested about, like, what you think about the film on like a technical level, because rewatching it, and I'm going to be honest, the director David Mickey Evans, whose movies have not really caught my attention.
Although he loves a kids movie, he wrote and directed. He's done nothing but kids films, really.
Yeah, what are the ones he's done? It's
so he wrote. He did Ed, which was that weird monkey baseball one with Joey from Friends.
Matt LeBlanc, yeah.
Matt LeBlanc. He wrote Radio Flyer, which I don't know if anyone knows what Radio Flyer is. Elijah Wood. And I'm pretty sure it's the kid from, what's it called? Jurassic Park. The boy from Jurassic Park. Yeah, Joseph Mazzello, I think his name is. And
Jesus it's about you're the only person in the world who remembers his name, 100%.
It's about them, who's stepdad, and different story on stepdad. Mm-hmm. Radio Flyer is about them and their stepdad, who constantly bullies, beats the crap out of Joseph Mazzello. So they decide to build a plane out of the Radio Flyer for Joseph Mazzello to escape in. And it's narrated by an uncredited Tom Hanks.
Oh, cool.
It's an odd film, but it's I don't want to say it's enjoyable because it's about stepfather abuse. Do you know what I mean? But
it's just like this movie, apparently.
Oh my God, Dennis Leary threw that ball too hard.
Yeah, out of your mind. Well, the thing is,
he did the Radio Flyer. He did Ed. He's done obviously the Sandlot II, I think, as well. But he's done He's done
which is rough. I mean, we'll talk about that in Legacy. But I mean, I think he directs this film absolutely fantastically. And I mean, the cinematography by Anthony B. Richards, who worked on Don't Look Now, Candyman, Legally Blonde. I think the score by David Newman's great. And I think it all elevates this film. You know, I think if you look at the sequel, I tried watching 10 minutes of the sequel, and that's directed by the same guy, set in the 70s. Why wouldn't it be of the same quality? It runs into that straight to DVD, straight to video kind of curse where it just hasn't got the budget to back up the premise, and you can just see from the off it just looks cheap, whereas this film, even though it's a small film in so many respects, it feels cinematic and it just sells you on that time and place. And as I said, you know, the fact that it's baseball, the fact that it's set in the 60s, not the 50s, it just didn't matter. It was just all relatable. And I think a big part of it was when we were growing up, and I'm sure this is something you can relate to, is even though we grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, I guess, you know, we would have been the actors' ages when so it would have been around 92, 93 would have been our equivalent rather than 1962. Yes. Is our childhood was much closer to that of a kid from the 50s and 60s than it is to a kid now. Yeah. And that's why they had to create a kind of, we're not Generation X and we're not a millennial. So we're actually falling into the Zennial group, where we were the last generation to grow up without any digital entertainment. So we got all the way through high school, past this age, and we didn't have computers, or most of us didn't. Well, one of my friends did, and he was the Asian kid.
That's
so
it.
A little bit on the nose.
Then. You're in the last year of high school, and the rich kids are the ones with their mobile phones. Then
no one had a mobile phone in my school.
Oh, I had one or two kids in my school showing off their massive brick phone with the massive aerial.
Yeah, but that's the difference. You're 1 year younger than me. And I remember that all came in my first year in college. But I think for most part, when we were both 12, 13, nobody had a mobile phone. Nobody had a computer. There wasn't this kind of satellite parenting. Basically, you were told to get out of the house. And when you got out of the house, you were out of the house and you got all day. Yeah, we might have had VHS, or we might have had like a NES, but you had such a limited amount of entertainment. So you just went out all day with your friends. Whereas now it's just completely unrelatable because everyone's got every TV show of all time at the touch of a button. They've got video games up the yin yang, and it's just our youth, our childhood had no relation to that. But it had so much in common with these kids from the 50s and 60s.
I remember one summer, right? We rode from Cardiff to Newport down the St. Bride's back lanes to go to. Do you remember Celtic Springs? You had the lake to go swimming in a lake that you're not meant to swim in, by the way, right? And I remember diving into that lake, landing randomly on a rock that had a bolt sticking out of it. The bolt stuck through my knee. Mm-hmm. So what did we do as kids who grew up like this? My brother tied a sock around the hole in my knee.
Yeah.
I then rode home 12 miles back to the house to tell my parents that I fell on a bit of broken glass, even though you can clearly see I've been penetrated by something else, right? For them to take me to the hospital to get stitched up, only to go back to that lake the next day to swim again with stitches in my knee. I could have got gangrene. I could have got anything. But it just
that's the thing, though, because you had fuck all else to do. Yeah. That was it. It was like you just went outside and just did shit because there was nothing to do in the house. We had 4 channels growing up. We didn't have cable or any of that nonsense. So again, it's all absolutely relatable. And again, my point being that is why this movie is so relatable, because you mentioned earlier, it's not a baseball film. And it kind of is. It doesn't matter. It's just a film about being a kid. Yeah. And yes, the second half, it becomes a kid's film rather than a movie about being a kid, if that makes sense. But yeah, I was surprised you didn't kind of relate to it more, and especially going after the kids. I mean, they're all so memorable as well. And I think a big part of it is just having like nicknames. Like you said, Squints, Ham, all that jazz. Like when I was younger, I was the only person who got away with his own name. Everyone else, it was Curly, Sultan, Puddin, Oats, Crazy, Trout, Duck. These were the names of the people I know. I know one guy who was called Method Oil and Mel Gibson. Yeah. I never found out why he was called those names. Ridiculous. A lot of these names, outside of like my closest group of friends, like the people I would refer to as acquaintances, I legitimately never knew their names. I was just like, I just know them as these bizarre nicknames. I was like, what's his real name? I'm like, I have no idea. No idea.
Our friend Dave, who usually sometimes does a podcast with us, my nickname is Wes. It's always been Wes ever since I was a kid. I think you were introduced to me as Wes.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm just not having it. I'm just calling you Rob. I don't know why.
So to the point where we've known each other for about 5, 6, 7 years at this point. We went out with some of my friends from work, and one of my friends, Gav, is talking to Dave and saying, "Oh, Rob is great. Rob is this. Rob is that." And after about an hour, Dave finally turned around to him and said, "Sorry, who's Rob?" He mentioned him, Rob, and he went, "The guy you drove in with. You mean Wes?"
That's Wes. I don't know this. Honestly, some of my friends, it makes my toes curl when I hear the name. My friend's Curly. It's like we call him Curly or we call him Banks now. Like it has changed. It's kind of evolved from Curly to Banks. But if anyone calls him Gareth, I'm just like, it just makes my toes curl. I'm just like, Gareth. It just doesn't sound like it. He doesn't look like a Gareth anymore. He looks like a Banks. It's bizarre. He's had a nickname since he was 7 years old. And I've known him since I was 5, and I don't think I've called him Gareth since I was 5. It's just, I find it very odd. It's like one of the guys in work. His name's Paul. we call him Pogba because his name is Paul, so Paul Pogba. And the fact that, ironically, he's not black and doesn't look anything like Paul Pogba. I've got to the point now where
I'm assuming he's a football player or something, is he?
Paul Pogba.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, he's a pretty famous football player. And now I've got to the point where my bosses refer to him as Pogba because I just never refer to him as Paul, like whether it be in emails or in like management meetings. I'm like, oh yeah, Pogba. So everyone just calls him Pogba now. It's ridiculous. It's just the power of nicknames. But yeah, I mean, so much of the conversation I had about this film was geared around the assumption that you would like the kids in this film, and especially Ham, who's got you're killing me, Smalls. This is baseball, not tennis. You play ball like a girl, would you have an issue with? I was just like, that's something, dude, that's something we would say in the 90s, let alone in the 60s.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm not, but now in this day and age, watching this film,
dude. Because kids are pussies. I mean, dude, again, the last 5 years, I've completely removed from any sense of youth, and it was the what's the new ones? Gen Z? Is that it? The new ones?
I don't know.
Millennials, I just thought were like us, but pussies. Whereas Gen Z, I have no idea what's going on. I have no fucking idea.
I honestly don't know any.
So I don't know if these kind of things offend kids in 2022. And I can assure you, I could not give a fuck because I hate revisionist history. I'm like, this is what it was like to be a kid. But kids are assholes. Young boys are dirty little bastards.
But
That's how the scene works.
I love bringing this stuff up because it winds you up.
I tell you though, do you know what winds me up the most is the use of the word Graham in America. Like, why do they say Graham? Graham. Oh, it does my head. And the s'more is one of my. I think I've mentioned it on another podcast. Like when I grew up, I always wanted to try a Twinkie because of Ghostbusters. Well, I've always wanted to try a s'more, but I've never actually tried one. And the reason I wanted to try a s'more, or I knew they existed, was because of this film. But growing up, I was like, what's a graham cracker?
To the point where I thought it was a cracker that weighed a gram.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. A graham cracker. That's what I thought. And then it was only afterwards, I was like, is he trying to say Graham? Is that what he's doing? Fucking Graham.
Yeah, but it's the same. I mean, I'm not trying to bag on the Americans, but it's the same with vehicle, and it's the fucking same
vehicle. You got to really lean into. It's got to be from the southern states. You drive that vehicle.
And the other one is Craig.
Oh yeah, Craig.
What the fuck is that?
I can't be dealing with that. I can't be dealing with that at all. What was the last thing I was going to? I've got a few more things very quickly to run through this film. I mean, when you were growing up, were you scared of dogs? Because I think that's one of the reasons, again, this film works. And I love dogs, but I went through a phase of being scared by dogs because basically I was walking down the street like a fucking cartoon. I had strawberry licorice hanging out of my pocket.
Okay.
And so this dog sees the strawberry licorice and just starts chasing me. But I didn't realize I had strawberry licorice hanging out of my pocket. So I'm just like, this dog, for no reason, just wants to kill me. So I'm running down the street and it's just running after me. I'm like, fuck, this is how I die. And eventually I see the strawberry licorice hanging out of my pocket. I throw it at the dog in an act of desperation and it stops and eats the licorice.
You know why I wasn't scared of dogs growing up?
Why is that?
Because I was the one that had dogs that other kids were scared of growing up.
Oh, yeah.
I had, growing up from 6 years old until they passed away, a Great Dane and a Doberman.
Awesome. Yeah, those are, funnily enough, a Doberman is the reason that I stopped being scared of dogs. And when I say scared, I wasn't terrified of them, but I was just a little bit wary. But one of my friends had a Doberman around the corner. And of course, Dobermans are the scariest looking fucking dogs in the world. And I went around his house like, Jesus Christ, look at that fucking dog. And that dog was the nicest dog in the world. So of course, I'm like, well, dogs are just the best. And I ended up loving dogs because of their dog, Kisu, who was a Doberman. But yeah, it took a couple of years for me to come around.
Tasha and Christy, my Doberman and my Great Dane, mate. And they're the reason why I never want another dog. I had those dogs. I had them growing up. Great when they passed away. I'm not into dogs anymore.
Yeah.
To the point where my wife brought home a fucking dog in March, and we have one in the house. But yeah,
that's the story of so many pets. That's why I had cats. She just brought home. I was like, maybe we won't get a cat. So then she just brought home a cat, and it's impossible to be angry with a kitten. It's just impossible.
It's that thing where you say, me and my wife had a discussion about getting something, and we compromised, and she got something. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. She's getting away whether I like it or not. It's fucking...
Yeah, you might as well just get on board, mightn't you? But no, the only things I've got left is I still have this weird thing where I want to try chewing tobacco, despite the fact that it made all the kids like sick. I'm like, I kind of just have an interest. I just want to try it once.
There's the peer pressure. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't want to try it? It's the best.
Dude, that was like 90% of my youth. It's just kids being little cunts. That was such a big part of being a kid.
To be fair,
growing up was just peer pressure. It was all peer pressure.
You're remembering pretty much the bad things. That's how I tried my first beer. That's how I tried my first cigarette. Yeah, I totally get it. But when you look at it this way, and it's probably because I took an instant fucking dislike to Ham. So anything that fucking kid did, I just didn't like, and I just don't like him, dude.
I think you might be the first person I've ever met who's seen this film who not only dislikes Ham but doesn't love Ham. Like when you're growing up, of course you're like, man, Benny the Jet's the coolest and stuff. But now I look back, I'm like, the best characters are Squints and Ham by a country mile. Yeah. Ham has so many good lines in this film. The fact that you don't like him, I find bizarre. Like I love the scenes when he's like when he's playing catcher.
Yeah.
And he's like ragging on the kids. And he's like, oh, let's strike one. You know, just the shit he's giving. It's all, again, low-key stuff. But I just find it all incredibly charming.
Does it say something about you, the fact that you like the bully and Harvey Weinstein in this film?
Maybe so. But I think those are the realities of youth. I get annoyed now that people want to, sweep these things under the rug. Like I said, when we were 11, 12 years old, they even mentioned the film. Like, you would lie about the fact that you had seen Playboy. We used to, kids used to all the time that they had kissed a girl. Did you? Again, you talk about peer pressure thing. I didn't lie about because I was like, I've not made out with a girl when I was 11 or 12. And all my friends were like, I have. And I know at least 50% of them were just fucking lying.
Yeah, bullshit. Yeah, about losing your virginity at
copping off for the first time, as you used to call it back in the day.
Do you know you were copping off? Jesus Christ, that's a Cardiff phrase.
It's got to be copping off for him. Copped off with that.
My wife never actually thought this existed. She thought I made this up until a couple of my friends actually admitted that it's happened to them as well. Mm-hmm. Porno mags in a woods or in an alley.
100%. That was a massive part of growing up.
So basically, for anyone who doesn't know...
For anyone under the age of probably 35.
Doesn't know what this phenomenon is, there seemed to be an unwritten rule of passing down your porno mags to younger generations by leaving them in a black bag, in a holdall, but in random places.
Finding porn in the woods. It was just a thing. And again, it must be weird for kids to hear this now. And of course, you talk about the different ways we grew up and how we were so naive sexually because we had no... we just didn't see it. Now, of course, as soon as you have a mobile phone, you have access to all the porn that's ever been made. An absurd amount of porn. I do not know how you're a parent in 2022. It must be terrifying. However, back then, it was nobody had porn. No way. So the only way the first time most people saw legitimate pornography was standing next to their friends in the woods, a half-torn up porno mag from 1987. When I look back at it, it's insane. But
it's not just insane; it's gross.
See, I've got this kind of analogous kind of image in my head where you go into the woods, you cut down a tree, but then a month later you come back and plant a seed. So that's what you ostensibly do. It's just a porno tree. That's all it is.
Scattering copies of Readers' Wives everywhere.
Yeah, of course it was Readers' Wives or Razzle or whatever other filth you found in the woods. So yes, very, very bizarre. I'm not even sure what my initial point was before we done this porn
rabbit
hole. Jesus Christ. Do you have anything else you want to add? I mean, we could talk about the bizarre dream sequence when Benny the Jet meets the great Bambino in a dream. It's very, very bizarre. What's that, sorry?
Played by Art LaFleur.
Art LaFleur, who's just constantly in baseball films.
Yeah.
He's in all the baseball films. He plays a baseball player in Field of Dreams. He's one of the coaches in Mr. Baseball, which I keep bringing up all the time now with Tom Selleck. So yeah, he is. He's actually Mr. Baseball, if anything.
Isn't he Fred Savage's dad as well?
I think he is. Yeah. I think he is. But yeah, that whole sequence is really kind of bizarre, the way he picks up the cards about Hank Aaron. He's like, oh, do you mind if I pick up this card? I guess it's all that kind of dream logic, I suppose, because like the story is like Hank Aaron eventually ends up breaking
his record,
Babe Ruth's home run record. But of course, he wouldn't have known that because it was 1962, and he doesn't break the record until 1972, I think it is. And that was just his rookie card. But again, it felt a little bit pointless, but will allow. I actually thought that dream sequence was absolutely bananas. It did lead to, obviously, I think they just needed anything for Benny to come to the realization that he was just going to chase the beast, or he was going to outrun the beast wearing his, what were the trainers? PF Flyers?
PF Flyers.
Yeah, well, all of a sudden I was like, I want those trainers. Like I just assumed they were Converse, but
yeah, they are Converse. Well, they look exactly like Converse high tops. Well, I love it, right? How he brought out the whole thing when he brought out the shoes guaranteed to make you run faster, the PF Flyers, and he sits there and he swaps his PF Flyers.
You call them PF Flyers? I thought they were PF Flyers.
No, PF.
Oh, I thought they were PF Flyers.
No, they're PF Flyers.
Oh, I see.
And he swaps his PF Flyers for an identical pair of PF Flyers. Like they're identical. But
I mean, it was just brand placement. It was
what I loved about because it's a kids' film, right? And apparently they can fall 30, 40, 50 feet and be fine in these films, right? How when these kids fell, they all of a sudden became 7-foot men.
Yeah, the bit you're talking about, the bit where he jumps over the fence and falls on his back,
he jumps over
and
the
it's
fence.
Clearly an adult doing that.
But when the kids do it as well, when they're diving out of the treehouse, this is about to explode.
Oh yeah.
And they jump out, and like they like I said, they're adult men at this point.
Yeah. No, it is pretty weird, but I mean. Is there anything else you want to? I mean, we've not even mentioned the bad guy kids, which I always found quite amusing.
Yeah, but the reason we haven't mentioned the bad guy kids is because they're a throwaway. They don't appear throughout the film. They come halfway through the film. They make some stupid comments. There's a game then where everyone else just where our heroes kick their ass in the game.
Yeah,
and then they disappear again. There's no point in them.
Again, I quite like that sequence because, again, that first part of the film, it's like they're not that big a deal because they weren't. It was just the local kids. They just have a game. And I think that was that part of the film where he's basically just doing this like checklist of things that happen when you were younger. And those kids were a thing that happened when I was younger. Like there was a local team who we had like a beef with, the Somali Dragons, which of course sounds a little bit ropey now that we had beef with a team full of Somalis, but that was the truth of the matter. And the other thing was, when we were growing up, you would see it every so often. You'd show up on a Sunday morning when we used to play football, and you would see a team, and they would all have like the newest boots, the newest kit, and you're like, holy shit, they're going to be really good. And then you'd play them, and 9 times out of 10, you'd batter them because they weren't good. They were just rich, and their dads went out and bought them all the best stuff, but it didn't mean they were actually any good at football. So you'd go out and you give these well-dressed kids an absolute tatering. And again, that's what they do in this film. They show up, they've got the fancy, the ballpark, they've got all the kids, and then they go and absolutely smash them because the only thing they really are is rich.
I will give this film its due on a couple of things. The first one being that, yes, in regards to we would go out at 8 a.m., we wouldn't come back until the streetlights turned on. The way you actually let your parents know where you're going is by shouting through the letterbox, and then you're just gone for fucking hours. And we would travel through the stream. We would play fight. We would play fight with sticks with nails in them. Just it didn't matter. And
I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but like we used to play, what was it, with, what does Bart Simpson have? He has like his weapon of choice.
I don't know what you're on about.
That you would put stones in it and shoot at your friends.
Catapult,
Jesus Christ. So I just couldn't get the word out. We played like catapult wars with stones in them. And of course we played until one of us shot a stone into our friend's head. His head split open. We had to go to the hospital. And it's only when it happened you were like, well, yeah, that was going to happen.
You want a game? Do you remember at the bottom of St. Mellons, the garden centre by the roundabout? My dad used to own a business within there. So after school, we would go to that garden centre, me and my brother, during the summer holidays. So after school or during the summer holidays, Mum would take us there because she worked nights. So, and when my grandpa couldn't babysit, we go to my dad's until he finished work. And they had that garden centre. I don't know if you remember, if you ever went there when you were a kid, but they had an adventure playground behind there. But because my father worked or had a business there, we were allowed to go on that adventure playground for free.
Yeah.
And just behind that adventure playground, there was a defunct, like they had a little play train. So me and my brother would play that. And I'm not making this shit up, right? You can ask my wife whenever you see, you can ask Dave. We've told the story many times. Yeah. We played, and me and my brother made this game up, Brick Wars. Right?
I mean, the name's a little on the nose, but yeah, I can see where this is going.
Yeah. So basically, Brick Wars was we would start either end of this little railway, and the first person to get hit by a brick loses. Right?
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. To the point where I have 2 dents in my head because I was the younger brother, so I lost a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's only one way that's going to go. I mean, you know, the catapult with the stone is one thing. Brick Wars, that is turning it up a notch. I mean, I had a story about how we used to play like Acorn Wars and that hurt, but I feel like I've just been kind of like blown out of the water. Yeah. Fucking Brick Wars.
Brick Wars. Yeah.
It's like that is legitimately one step down from just gun wars. So we stood either side, you know, and we just shot each other until someone was dead.
And obviously, my brother who's 3 years older than me, he guarantee he made that game up.
Oh, of course, because all the
Brick Wars. Yeah.
Again, all this stuff though is just kind of remind you, like, dude, kids are shit houses. Like that is, and the stuff in this film is quite low key.
Film that the kids are shit, but as I watch this film now, I just can't forgive some of the little. And it's not going back and saying snowflakes and all that shit now.
No.
I appreciate, but. It's just, I don't know. It's just, you look at Ham, and I just think he's a complete and utter tosspot. I don't like him. And
well, this is going to be an interesting conversation now, because in the love and hate section, if I were to do love number 1, I've got the great Hambino, Patrick Renner, and Squints, Chauncey Leopardi. I've got them top of the list of things I love in this film. And I assume your hate list is going to be somewhat, you know, the inverse of this.
Right. Are we moving on to love and hate? Is there anything else?
Well, yeah, I mean, no, let's just move on to love and hate. We're already here. So, yeah, I've got number 1, the great Hambino and Squints. Needless to say, you're going to disagree with that. The timeless representation of youth. I think we both agree that is one of this film's strongest points. And that sense of youthful myth-making, a la, you know, Giant Dogs, the guy who lived in the creepy house, you know, Stand By Me does a similar thing, Chopper, Sick Balls. It's like making something out of nothing. That's what we did when we were younger. It's what this film captures absolutely perfectly. I know that's part of, you know, the second one as well, but those are definitely my favorite elements of the film when I look back at it. But yeah, those are my loves.
How have we not mentioned James Earl Jones?
Which is insane. He's in this very briefly. He's very good, as James Earl Jones always is. But yes, he's not quite made the list. But I think simply because he gets introduced so late in the game, no pun intended.
But I still like the whole, like, why didn't you just ask me to come and get it? Things like that.
Oh yeah.
He's delivering these lines. It's like, George signed this, or you are definitely in trouble. Things like that. Like, James Earl Jones is on my list for that. I love James.
Oh yeah, that's a great show.
Benny taking Smalls under his wing. I really loved, like, that he could tell this kid just wanted to make friends. So
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, as I said, he's whatever you might say about the other kids, and I get, like, you know, I appreciate what you're saying. Ham is a dick, but that's why I like him. Yeah. Whereas Benny the Rodriguez is legitimately the perfect kid. As I think I mentioned in the podcast, the idea that he's eulogizing his friend. But
that's why I totally appreciate, like, the unrequited love story that George has for Benny. Do you know what I mean? I mean, he fell in love with him at an early age, and yeah, he's loved him all the way through life. So
who wouldn't, though? He was a dream. You know, what could you do?
He had smouldering eyes.
He did. Well, that, like I said, when you were 12, 13 watching this, that was the kid you wanted to be. You're like, holy shit, if only I was as cool and athletic and as awesome as Benny the Jet. But of course, nobody is, because he's the kid from his memories. He's the perfect friend. His love interest, as you put it.
I loved as well. Dennis Leary. It's like Dennis Leary didn't want to be in this film. Every time this kid talked to him, he just looked pissed off.
Oh yeah, he was just like, oh dude, do you want to play baseball? It's like, I think he knew deep down that Smalls was going to suck ass at baseball. It's like, you know, again, we've not mentioned, you know, Marion Ravenwood, who's in this film. Yeah. She's very good in this film as well. Doesn't get much to do, but very good. But that's the whole point. This film shouldn't be about the parents. It's just about being outside.
I always thought Karen Allen, she has that exotic, especially as Marion Ravenwood. Mm-hmm. Those smoky eyes. Like, she's always got that distant look. She looks like Meg Foster as Evil Lynn, Do you know, it's.
See, I think she gets away with though, because the one thing it's strange that you mentioned Her Eyes, because bizarrely I was watching Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls for some reason, or at least 10-15 minutes of it. It was just randomly on TV, and the thing that always stands out for me is a smile. It is ear to ear. She has such a charming smile,
but she has this like. It's really hard to explain, but just it kind of lights up a room the way she looks. And
100%.
You don't see much of her. Even back then, like I didn't fucking know Karen Allen was in this film. She walked through the door to talk to her kid. Now, fuck me, as Karen Allen.
Yeah. Well, that is the point. Like, this film really isn't about parents. And again, you talk about like different
times she hasn't got a name, is she?
No, she does. It's just
Smalls.
Yeah, or it's Mum or whatever.
You know Dennis Leary's name because he can never make it up. It's either Dad or Bill at that point.
Yeah. But yeah, she has a small role, but similar to James Earl Jones, what she does in this film is great. And again, you talk about a different time. Like, this kid's obviously an overachiever. But she's literally telling us, like, listen, just go outside. Like, it was weird not to go outside. When we were younger, if you were the kid who stayed home all the time, you were weird as shit. Because everyone just went out like, summer, you would get up, you would have breakfast, and you would just go out. And when I say go out, I mean, that's it. Just fucking outside. And you were out all day.
To the point where you knew it was time to come home, when you could hear on the wind your parents' voice as they're standing on the door. My mum used to just stand on the doorstep and call me like Lassie, Robert. And you think, oh, mum's calling me, gotta go home.
You see, now I've got like 7 doors, like a group of mums all here, Robert.
Yeah, that's Robert. Pretty much where we grew up, because we grew up in St. Mellons and we lived in a cul-de-sac, and right at the end of the cul-de-sac was a lane. You go through and you end up in the park, and there's a play park, there was a stream, there was the road to Tesco in St. Mellons. And we were just gone. You would see us disappear, and that was like a portal. You would see us just disappear through that alley, and you wouldn't see where we went, and we'd be gone for fucking hours.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing, like the lack of mobile phones, which are the bane of modern movie making. I've mentioned it a whole bunch of times. And certainly for youth, I mean, like, all these kids want mobile phones. It's like they're putting the shackles on themselves and they don't realize it. It's like, that was the beauty of it. And I'm not saying, everything about being a kid in the 80s and 90s was perfect, but the fact that when you left the house, especially, it was such a big deal when you were growing up, that time when suddenly your parents, just said, okay, you're out with your friends now. It's not that weird thing where they would sit at the front of the house and watch you play on the street. It was like, all right, you're just with your friends now. You'd leave and just be like, you were just gone. There was no contacting you.
To the point now where left. Where any film happens now with a mobile phone, it has to be, we're in a dead zone. Do you have signal? I don't have signal. Like, it's just, they have to write that in now. And you just think, this is...
You've got to write around it. It's slightly annoying.
No, sorry. Yes,
is that everything for
Jones? I think it was James Earl Jones, Dennis Leary, and I said another one. I can't remember.
Karen Allen.
No, I didn't say Karen Allen.
I was just going to say, you're just picking adults. This is how much you hate the kids in this film. You've just picked 3 adults that you love, all having small roles.
I can't remember what my third was.
Playing outside.
Yeah, playing outside. That was it.
Yeah. Well, hate, this is going to be interesting. Mine, so often the case, bad sequels are something of a depressing regularity on this podcast. If you're going to be a sequel to a beloved movie, but you do it properly. We're
talking about this film.
I love this film.
Sequels to your hate. You can't add sequels to your hate. Especially because you haven't seen them. You saw 10 minutes of a sequel. You haven't.
That was enough. That's enough. Yeah. That's enough. That's all I'm saying.
Sorry, I'm vetoing it. You cannot.
No, I can absolutely tell. If you watch 10 minutes of film, you can just see it. You can it's the dialogue, the way it's shot, and you're like, this is a cheap ass piece of shit, and it's a horrible knockoff.
I appreciate you doing that, but we're talking about Sandlot kids now.
Okay.
You cannot add sequels as a hate to this fucking film. And you can't justify it by going, the fact that this led to a sequel. No, it's not allowed, dude.
Okay. I'll work around it now. Okay, so I'll do my other ones. The fact that, see, again, this feels like something about me rather than about the film, but it is the fact that I'd be the one doing the narrating now. Like, I have such clear memories of being the kids in this movie, and now I'm the fucking narrator instead. I find that very depressing. But again, that's not about the movie. The fact that Mike Vitar, Benny the Jet, didn't become a star, that's the other thing I've got written down. It's just like, oh shit, I've not written anything about this film. They're all things surrounding this film. So you're right, you're going to have to come up with some, I'm sure you will, Jesus Christ, because I'm going to have to think about this.
Do you want me to give you 6?
Yeah, that might have to do the trick, I think.
Yeah, I didn't like Ham. I really didn't like him. No, didn't like him. The Sandlot, right? Explain to me The Sandlot. It's a place where they just got to go and play. It was like an abandoned...
It's just a baseball ground, so it
was an abandoned lot or something. But it was a baseball ground then at some point. And they built houses around it?
Yeah. Okay. So it's just like a disused baseball, like old baseball ground, which they just...
Because then I can't hate it. Because I was going to hate that it was just a used field, but they managed to put a baseball stand, a baseball fence, a baseball diamond. You know what I mean? Like,
but again, that would have been created by them, like jumpers for goalposts, but like an elite level, basically.
Yeah. Well, no, because it had advertisements on the backboard. Yeah. So there was no way that had to be a used baseball field at some point.
Oh, it would have been in the past. I would have thought so. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. If it was just them making it, I would have hated that because there's no way these bunch of kids would have been able to create that. So yeah. So that's fine. So no, I hate Ham.
so you say,
yeah. I hated the fact that what they were like to George. I hated the way he had to lie to fit in.
I think that's fine. But yeah, again, that's fine. They're very, 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 very different opinions on this film. Well, no, but it is interesting that we watched it in such... It's not just the fact that I like this film and you dislike this film. It's like interesting that every aspect of it, we've just taken it in a completely different way. We've watched the films in completely different lights. Like everything you see as a negative, I'm like, oh, I find it quite sweet. Like even the stuff where they're busting his chops, I don't think anything in this film I find even remotely mean-spirited. But obviously you do it, which is strange. But then, like you said, like the bit of the pool, and I know some people look at it and go, oh, well, it's just like a little kid like sneaking a kiss. It's like a bit weird. I'm like, I find it all just oddly sweet, which is ridiculous maybe, but that's just how I watched it.
Speaking of the pool, right, I wouldn't say this is a hate, and I'm a swimmer. I swim daily in a public pool. But I'm just, a pool back in the 60s where that's just got to be full of piss at this point, haven't it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like a public pool like that. I mean, yeah. Absolutely. You're swimming in urine for sure. So that's what you hate about this film, the idea that they're swimming around in urine.
I mean, hate is it like, what? It's really weird because yet this film just didn't great, but I can't think of an individual hate.
Just Ham.
Yeah. Just
Squints.
Was a prick. And Squints Squints should be in prison.
Squints should be in prison. He's married to this girl. They were obviously meant to be. All right, so we'll move on.
Syndrome. He's got something against.
Of course. Do you have any facts before we move on?
Yeah, I got a few.
Yeah, go for me.
So actually, that's what I hated. Sorry, my third hate was keeping all your prized baseball memorabilia in your shack of an office where anybody could just walk in and steal it.
Of course,
yeah. Honestly, that thing looked rickety as fuck. He's meant to be in the Dodgers Stadium or wherever it is, right? And it looks like they just gave him some weird bloody...
Well, the thing is, I guess, obviously it wouldn't be the case now, but especially back in the 80s, a lot of these baseball stadiums, and I can't speak directly to the LA Dodger Stadium back in what would have been 92, but a lot of them are old-fashioned stadiums. And the same with football and stuff, of course, you get these super fancy stadiums now when they're built with, kind of VIP and all that jazz. But a lot of the older stadiums in particular, before they're renovated, that is exactly what they are. They're shacks. Like even the fanciest ones, like, like Anfield, obviously, you take that as an example, an old stadium, but that's had so much work on it to kind of renovate it up to modern standards. Back in the 90s, a lot of these stadiums would have been very similar to the stadium that existed in like the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, and they were just shack. It's like Liverpool, the boot room was literally a boot room where all the largest figures, most important figures of the club, that's where they went after the game. That would never happen now. They would have a luxury suite. But I think in the 90s in particular, you still would have had a holdover of a lot of older stadiums, which would have just been shacks. That doesn't excuse the lack of a lock on the door, of course. But I am going to say that those probably did exist still.
Before I go on to facts, how did we not mention Brandon Quincy Adams as well? Mm-hmm. Brandon, who as the pitcher, the one who ended up playing my minor league ball, who was in the first two Mighty Ducks.
People Under the Stairs.
And again, he was in one of my favourite films growing up, People Under the Stairs. I love that.
That's a weird one. We should probably do that for the podcast because bizarrely, two of my best friends loved that movie and watched it loads. And for some odd reason, it just never made it round the block to my house. I think I've seen half of it once, but for some odd reason, it's this odd blank spot. But he's probably the most successful of the kids because, again, one of the things we've not mentioned is the fact that a lot of the kids in this film never really went on to do anything all that big. I mean, he's played small parts in other films like Mystic River, Black Hawk Down, U-571. Hamilton, Ham, he was in like a few episodes of ER, but he was in like a Disney soccer movie, The Big Green.
Squints. Steve Guttenberg. I've seen that.
Yeah. And Benny the Jet, where you watch this film and think that should be a star-making performance. He's become a firefighter, but he's been arrested for assault. A lot of the kids in this film have got kind of criminal records now, and it's just a shame. And it's often the case where it's very rare for child actors to go on and have kind of careers as grown-ups.
Yeah,
it's and a lot of them, because of these bizarre lives that they live as kind of child stars, it doesn't equate to kind of just a normal life going into their 30s and 40s. But that's one of your, I don't say I hate, but it's a bit of a shame that none of the kids really went on to do anything massive. Like not a single one of them, sadly. But what can you do?
So, all right, I'll move on to facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
The older and young Benny are played by real-life brothers, Pablo and Mike Vitar.
Mm-hmm.
So that was quite good, because I thought there was a resemblance.
God, he must have been a lot older. And that's another weird thing, that final sequence when he sees older Benny stealing bases in like 93. Benny would have been 44 years old. I know baseball players play longer, but the idea of a 44-year-old player stealing a base, I'm not sure if I'd buy that at all. But
I think maybe they made him look older by giving him a porn star mustache.
They really did give him that porn star mustache, didn't they? Dodgy as fuck.
So, director David Mickey Evans had one clear instruction for Chauncey Leopoldi during the sexual assault scene when he kisses Wendy Peppercorn: keep your tongue in your mouth.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that is the whole point. And it's why the scene works, is because he's zero threat. It's like he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just like, I like that, as in her, and I don't know why. That kind of pure confusion of being, and again, you've got to remember, this isn't 2022, kids, where you have the internet and stuff. You are 11, you're 12 years old, you're growing up. There's no explanation for any of this stuff. All of a sudden, one day you wake up and you're like, why am I obsessed with her all of a sudden? Why do I want to kiss her? And of course, what he did, he shouldn't have done. But, if you're going to kind of justify it, he was willing to die for that kiss. So, I'll defend Squints to the death, sir.
What was I going to say? We were talking about...
Facts.
Do you know who played Wendy Peppercorn, by the way?
I did have a name down. Marley Shelton from Scream.
Scream, yeah. So she was David Arquette's deputy in Scream 4. Are we on 5 now? Scream 5. I think we are.
Well, I think Scream 5 just called Scream. Yeah, we've run out of numbers, so we're just calling it Scream again. She was also in Grindhouse, bizarrely.
Yeah, she was. Yeah,
I quite like that film.
In order to establish the close bond between Smalls and Benny, the director had Tom Gueri and Mike Vitar meet and rehearse together weeks before the rest of the kids showed up to film. It worked so well that the other kids genuinely believed the two actors had been friends for a long time.
Well, that is one of the reasons, again, this film works so well, is that you just feel that chemistry. They actually feel like friends. Like, that is the beauty of this film. Like, they're all hanging out together, and I'm just like, I watch it, I'm like, yeah, I buy it. They're all different, but you're just kind of stuck because you're the same age group and you live in this little town and you're just best friends, and that's all there is to it. But yeah, the chemistry in this film is absolutely spot on.
For most of the filming, the days were very hot. However, during the filming of the pool scene, it was overcast, and the water was 56 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 13 Celsius. All the kids were extremely cold and can be seen shivering before Squints pretends to drown. You can see his teeth chattering, which is quite good because that's meant to be nerves, because he's about to go to jail for sexual assault. But obviously it's him being freezing, jumping into a pool. It's really funny in it because the days are meant to be so hot while they're playing, but that day they go to the pool in the film, it's meant to be like baking.
Yeah.
That's why they go swimming. So it's quite funny that that's the day they decide, we'll have cold water. We'll do it while it's freezing in the pool.
Yeah. You can see it, especially when they're leaving the pool. It suddenly looks quite overcast and cold.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole sequence, like even the fact, one of the things I noticed about that scene, the whole idea that it's like this nostalgic world and it's got no basis in reality, is when they get thrown out of the water park And she's like, get out of here, you little creep, never come back. They run past the changing rooms, and all you see is an arm throw all of their clothes out the door. Like somebody's just waiting there with their clothes to throw it out the door. They don't run back in and get changed. Somebody's just waiting there and throws all their clothes at them. It's ridiculous.
PF Flyers were brought back for a limited time after the movie.
Awesome.
But still, you can't get any?
No, they were bought up by New Balance, I think, and they kind of started phasing them out. And I think as recently as 2021, but very hard to get them there.
Mr. Myrtle shows the boys a photo of himself with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Of course, it is a retouched photo. Jones' head was put on the body of Hall of Famer slugger Jimmy Fox, who was the real player pictured with Ruth and Gehrig. The real photo can be seen in many baseball books.
Awesome.
The child actors had so much fun playing, they considered it the greatest summer of their lives.
It's all up on screen. You absolutely buy into it, that it is their best summer of all time.
The vomit used in the ride scene was made from split pea soup, split pea soup, baked beans, oatmeal, water, and some movie gel. They used paint guns to discharge it, and they actually nailed a few people in real life by accident. The chewing tobacco was made from beef jerky and licorice. I think I would prefer chewing tobacco.
I think so. I think some of the kids even said that they actually felt sick after chewing that for a while, which, makes sense. It sounds gross.
The hat that Kenny is wearing is that of a Kansas City Monarchs. The Kansas City Monarchs were a Negro League team active from 1920 to 1965. Many of the young actors snuck into a nearby movie theater to watch Basic Instinct.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's when you know your friends, when you're sneaking into cinema to watch a raunchy X-rated movie or R-rated movie, whatever it would be.
Yeah. We've already said that Brandon Adams and Mike Vittar also were in the Mighty Ducks.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the bottom of the barrel for these now. So we might.
All right, well, let's just move on to Legacy, I suppose. In terms of Legacy, yes, bad sequels, sadly, 2 and 3. I mean, admittedly, I've not watched all of 2 and 3, but I watched a bit of each of them, and they are rough.
So I know the story. I've read the synopsises for both. So 2 is random because 2 is actually set after 10 years after.
Yeah, set in 1972.
It's Smalls' little brother who grew up hearing the story of Hercules, and there's a new dog, Mr. Murr. It's basically 1 again. But, yeah. And then
but not as good,
And then 3 is about Luke Perry, who is a baseball player, gets hit in the head, travels back in time, where Benny is now a coach for a Sandlot team. So Benny's in all 3 of these films apparently, but different actors and stuff. Yeah, so they sound off. And coming from a guy who has watched nearly every, as you say, every film.
This happens less now because people are more protective of their IPs. So the days of making cheap, straight, like that quick buck at the expense of like a beloved movie are almost gone, which I think is a good thing. Like nowadays, if you had a film as beloved as this, and turned into something of a cult movie, they would put some actual money behind a sequel and try and make something half decent. Back then, they're just like, oh well, we'll just throw a few quid at it. We'll make a bit of money based off the name and forget all about it. You see it even with like Disney and stuff. Like Disney all the time, they would never make sequels that went to the cinema. If you made a sequel, it was straight to DVD nonsense, Scar's Revenge, all that crap. Those days are gone now because they're, again, too protective of their IPs. And we've talked about it a bunch of time. We live in a world where IP is king now rather than movie stars. So yeah, these kind of sequels, they just don't happen anymore. And to be honest, that is not something I miss because they're often quite terrible. There is supposedly an upcoming prequel. We'll see if that ever happens. Similar to the other baseball podcast we've done, League of Their Own, where that's more of a remake, I suppose. But as to whether these things will ever happen, who knows?
Well, that's it. Yeah, no, to the League of Their Own one is actually coming out. It's already, it's on Amazon Prime as a TV show.
Is it already out?
Well, not already out, but they have actually showed stills and I think a trailer. So it'll be out soon. Yeah.
Well, I mean, fingers crossed for that. But as to whether I need to see that almost perfect movie remade, and that's one of the things. Like in terms of legacy, it's just this great legacy of baseball movies. We've mentioned a few of them there, but League of Their Own, Field of Dreams, Moneyball, Major League, Bill Durham, Basketballs. Does that count as a baseball film? I don't know, and I'm not sure if it's even that good a film. But regardless of what you think about baseball, it is inherently the most cinematic of all sports. Like one of the reasons I grew up. Like I have this romanticized picture of what baseball is, and it's based purely on movies. And part of it, like to bring it back to the Kobe Bryant point, was that 4th of July scene with America the Great playing. It's just cinematic. The Natural, when Robert Redford with the rise in score and he hits the baseball into the lights. That's why there's no great football movies or soccer movies, sorry, because it just doesn't lend itself to cinema. Baseball is all about. No, I don't like golf. I don't like Victory. I don't like any of these bullshit films. Obviously, in terms of its real legacy, it's been more impactful in the US because of its place as a baseball film. Over here, it's more because it's a kids' film. And sadly, we mentioned already in terms of the legacy, none of the kids really kicked on career-wise, which is a bit of a shame. I see all these kids. I think, despite our difference of opinion, I think they're all legitimately fantastic kids' performances. I think the chemistry is brilliant, and it's just a bit of a shame that none of them really went on to become major stars, especially Benny the Jet, who really does have that kind of star in the making look about him. But obviously, it didn't work out. Score and soundtrack, we cool with that?
Yeah. I don't really. The score is forgettable. I don't really remember the score.
The score by David Newman, who's covered a bunch of films we've already done: Bill and Ted, Serenity, movies we might cover: Mighty Ducks, Coneheads, Jingle All the Way, Bowfinger, Galaxy Quest. These are all classic films, but not Norbit. He did Norbit. We're not covering Norbit. But no, I think the score for this film is absolutely fine. But I think what stands out for me, and I've already mentioned it, is the soundtrack. It's all pure nostalgia, but it's implemented perfectly. This magic moment by Benny King and the Drifters after Squints gets his kiss, it makes a sweet moment out of a creepy moment because the way it kind of cuts in.
Every time you see Wendy Peppercorn, they're both Drifters songs as well.
Yeah. Again, those songs are just pitch perfect. And when Benny hits that home run on Independence Day with the fireworks going off, and you've got America the Beautiful being played by Ray Charles, it paints a perfect picture of Americana in like the late 50s, early 60s. And again, what I grew up with, this kind of concept of what America could be or maybe should be. And I think it's a shame that a lot of that stuff gets caught up in Make America Great Again. That nostalgia has been somewhat tarnished rather than celebrated. But when I grew up, that was my kind of concept of Americana was like perfectly encapsulated by these moments and by these perfectly chosen moments, perfectly chosen kind of soundtrack moments in the film. But that's what stands out for me is more the soundtrack rather than the score. The score's fine, but the soundtrack is king in this film. And those are the two that really stood out for me. And the fact that they're back to back, absolute belters in the film. But yeah, the only other thing is, I've talked about like the negative side of it, the fact that it now sounds a little bit like, Make America Great Again and stuff. To me, when I hear like old 50s, 60s Americana music, do you know what it reminds me of? Frankie and Benny's.
Yeah.
It just reminds, like, one of the reasons I used to like going to Frankie and Benny's before the food turned shit and they raised all the prices was that I used to go in and they'd have all these like news clippings on the wall from like the 30s, 40s, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig. It was all paper clippings from America, from like baseball, from New York and stuff. And they'd have these songs playing. And I know it's a chain, but I used to find it super charming. But yeah, it's been tarnished now because that restaurant's kind of gone downhill. But what can you do? How about video games? You got anything down for that?
Well,
because there isn't, just to be clear, there isn't a video game based on this movie.
This kind of story, you can't, like, maybe you could.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't think of anything that I'd like to see in it's not a baseball film. It's not and there's no video games about growing up.
Well, I had to think pretty hard about this. So in terms of a personal nostalgia, I was like, well, this film it wouldn't be a baseball game, but it would have baseball in it. In terms of the pure baseball mechanics, and this very much is a deep cut for some of my friends growing up back in Roath and Cardiff, was that I'd bring back the Sega development team that worked on 1995's World Series Baseball for the Sega Saturn, which I thought had that perfect kind of mix of, it felt like a baseball game, but it was kind of arcadey, and, for people who weren't massively into baseball at the time, we could get into it. But look, to your point, what games are about youth and about growing up. And the one that really stands out for me is Earthbound for the SNES by HAL Laboratories, which is like a relatively I say it's a low-key JRPG with this, like, it really does capture that sense of youth. It is about fighting a universal cosmic destroyer, but that's not the tone of the game. It's very much you in your local neighborhood. And it's a video game about being young. So I would smash together Earthbound and World Series Baseball on the Sega Saturn to create the perfect
All right.
Sandlot Kids video game.
Do you want my idea?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Yeah. 2006, Rockstar did a game called Bully.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically just fucking Ham, isn't it? Just walking around being a...
So you just call it Ham, and it's just him being a little shite bag.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fair enough. I mean, I think I prefer my version, but your version would probably sell better in fairness.
Probably, yeah. Because everyone's a shite bag. I don't care what you say.
Oh, man, I love fucking Ham in this film. I mean, that's like, as soon as we started this podcast, and honestly, just to be clear for anyone listening, we don't discuss these things beforehand. All this stuff, we write our notes, we have our opinions, and then we talk about it live. There's no editing. I found out that Rob liked Ham about 3 seconds into this podcast, and my heart nearly broke because I had all these things written down. I was like, well, this is really going to change the tone of this podcast because so much of what I had written was based about the fact it was built around how much I love the kids in this film. Yeah. And when you said straight away, I fucking hate Ham, Squints is a sex offender, Smalls is getting molested by his stepfather, I'm like, oh, holy shit, what the fuck?
There's some dark undertones to this.
You've ruined this film for me. It's just, oh my goodness. Well, we'll get around to it. Maybe perhaps I'll hate people under the stairs when we eventually do that podcast. Who knows? But this is, I guess, it all comes down to this. This is going to be the interesting bit: the ratings and the recommendations. I mean, unsurprisingly, I would recommend this to everyone. Obviously, I shouldn't have recommended it to Rob. I think this is a mega... You don't need to know about baseball. You just need to have grown up at some point in your life. I think it's super relatable. I think it's... I'm going to give it 4 stars, but this is another one of those really strong 4 stars. Like, you know, I don't want to get carried away and give it a 5-star, but this is a really, really strong 4-star film, which I loved growing up, and I think hasn't aged a day. A lot of that is down to the fact that it has that, again, I know it's set in 1962, but it has that great 50s Americana vibe. The stuff the kids are wearing still looks cool.
Yeah.
You know, the cars still look great. There's white picket fences. Again, this idea of kind of like classic Americana is still there.
You're still obsessed with it being in the 50s. It was 1962, dude.
No, that's what I mean. It's so bizarre. I can't shift my head to the idea that it just looks like a 50s film. And we've talked about it with the movies that we've covered on this podcast. You know, we draw these lines in the sand based on decades, but it doesn't work like that. It's like when we went back and did Rambo First Blood, it's 1982. Same with 48 Hours, 1982. They feel like 70s movies still. And it wasn't until around 84, 85 that movie started feeling like what we think of as being 80s films. And it's the same with this. The 50s, yes, they ended as we moved into 1960s. But that sense of culture that came from the 50s, it didn't just die at the end of 1959. It bled into the 60s. And it's probably more around the mid-60s, latter half of the 60s, when you get the Summer of Love and stuff like that. That's what we have in our heads, cinematically at least, our concept of what 60s Americana is. But that didn't exist in 1962. So it still has one foot in the 50s. So that's my excuse anyway. But yes, I love this film. I recommend it to everyone except for Rob.
Except for Rob. Yeah, Rob doesn't get to watch it anymore.
No. You've ruined it. You've ruined it for yourself.
I wouldn't recommend it. I didn't have a good time with it, to be fair. Yeah. I'm not trying to take it away from you, obviously.
No, that's fine.
I mean, everyone has their different opinions.
All I'll say is I am legitimately surprised. I didn't think you were going to love it as much as I did because I grew up with it, but I would have bet the farm that you would have enjoyed this film. I'm legitimately surprised that you didn't like it to this level.
And it's a 2-star, dude.
Yeah. I mean, that was written all over it. I mean, I would have been amazed if you come back. It's like, 4 stars. I agree. So what the fuck?
Don't watch this film, but it's 4 stars.
4 stars. Yeah. I hate it. Don't watch it. 4 stars. Classic. I don't think we've got this rating system down at all, to be honest. Well, Jesus Christ. What are you picking for next week, sir?
Well, before actually I go on to next week, we've had an email. We've had one from this listener before, Glenn Lash from California. I hope I got that right. Now, he's probably going to hate this episode.
I hope I got that right. Oh, sorry, you mean in terms of if he's from there? I thought you meant like the pronunciation. I was like, yeah, dude, I'm pretty sure California is pronounced California.
Oh, yeah.
California. It's like vehicle again. Vehicle.
The reason why I wanted to actually read this email, last week we released Point Break, and we were very stuck up on the Bodhisattva thing.
Yeah.
So he has actually sent us Bodhisattva. It's Mayana Buddhism, a person who is able to reach nirvana but delays doing so out of compassion in order to save suffering beings.
Sounds like tantric sex to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
And so she calls in the Bodhisattva because he's such a cool, otherworldly cult leader. Keep up the great show and review Cat People sometime. So he still wants us to do Cat People.
I mean, dude, I rewatched the trailer for Cat People, and it's even more insane than I remember. I mean, we will do it one day because it is bonkers. It's a movie I was not aware of. If there's one thing you actually take away from this podcast, watch the Cat People trailer.
Yeah,
it's like there's some talent in that film.
Yeah.
Like it's clearly had money. I think Bowie's doing the soundtrack on,
it's Malcolm McDowell.
Malcolm McDowell, yeah. There's talent involved, and it is insane. I can't believe it exists, or it did exist, and I didn't know about it. So yes, one day we will do Cat People.
Once we can find it in the UK, we will get around to it.
That's 100%. But yeah, so next week, dude, what are we doing?
This is a complete change of pace. We've been talking about. Like last week again, talking about Point Break, we talked about War Child, and we talked about him being in Cyborg and things like that. So I thought, do you know what, Cyborg? What we should really do? Universal Soldier.
Yeah, well, I guess it's like seven degrees of separation or of Kevin Bacon or whatever the hell it's called. We've eventually got around to Universal Soldier. I mean, I think that's a great shout, and I think that's a wise shout, because it would have been easy for us to, let's do Cyborg, because we've kind of half been talking about it. But I think we both know that Cyborg is shite. We both enjoyed it growing up, and maybe we will still do it one day. We're gonna eventually run out of half decent films. But Universal Soldier, I think that's a good choice, because I really had fond memories of that growing up. I haven't seen it for a long, long time now, but there's some serious talent involved. You've got peak Dolph Lundgren. Again, this isn't a small budget movie. This was the big hit back in
1991, 92, something around that. FYI, I've seen all 5 sequels.
Brilliant. Well, I think you can take care of the legacy section next week. So yeah, please join us for not Cyborg, for instead 1991 or 1992 Universal Soldier. We can't quite remember now. There's some good stuff on video games on Universal Soldier as well, which obviously I'll save for next week. But yes, this has been The Sandlot, or as we called it, The Sandlot Kids, a movie I loved, Rob didn't feel so strongly about. I suspect we will have our opinions will be much more aligned for next week's movie, I think.
I will say, you said Rob didn't feel strongly about it. Rob felt strongly about it, just the other way.
Just the other way. But yeah, I've got a funny feeling we both might have similar opinions on it.
Yeah, I have a feeling as 80s and 90s action kids, I got a feeling that we're going to be going towards the more positive side of this. But I guess we'll wait and see on a rewatch. I mean, it's been a while since I've rewatched it. But
no, same here. So I'm actually really looking forward to this one. So yeah, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. But if you haven't seen it before, if you haven't seen it for a long time, go back and watch Universal Soldier, and please do join us next week. But as always, thank you for giving us a listen, and catch you guys soon. Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing.
Cheers, Darry.
Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.